I used to think that social justice, when it came into many churches in the Southern Baptist Convention and so forth, I used to think that it was another religion infiltrating the church. And I used to think that it was it had a different Christ, it had a different doctrine than the Orthodox historic Christian doctrine, and so therefore it's a different religion altogether. I used to think that before I read this article and I began to research what was in this article. I no longer think it's just a different religion. Today, I believe it is a different religion that is a cult because it displays cult like behavior. Now, this is the Bidi Enabwili in the picture there. He is probably the top social justice uh, advocate in the church today. In other words, he's pushing the social justice religious cult in the church more than any other pastor today. And he came up with a Bible study called Whiteness 101. You can see it here. And it's a Black liberation theology for small groups. So you can get it. And as a matter of fact, it's free online. You can take a look at it online and read it for yourself. Just look up Whiteness 101. But here's a quote from from the Beatty. I keep wanting to say his last name, Anabuli, but the Beatty said this: "Provide space for POCs to well cuss, POC being a person of color, to well cuss or even yell at you." He's telling this to white people, white Christians. Jesus didn't hold back when he saw hypocrisy and oppression. POC shouldn't have to either. Now, this is why I believe this is not just another religion with a different Jesus and a different doctrine than the one that is the true Jesus, the one true God, and the correct doctrine, which is the Orthodox historic doctrine of the Christian faith, which was founded by Christ to his apostles, to those first century Christians um, who are you can read about in the apostolic fathers and ante-Nicene fathers and their writings and so forth, and then on up to the Reformation, where the Reformation reformers brought the church back to biblical Christianity by adhering to faith alone and by grace alone and Christ alone for salvation, and all the way to the Puritans and all the way up to today, the Orthodox historic Christianity. And yet this social justice cult has entered the door of many churches and infiltrated it. And you say, why do you keep calling it a cult? Well, because look at this quote. This is a quote of control and manipulation. It's a quote which is saying, look, submit to our authority, sit down, shut up, and let us abuse you. That's cult-like behavior, folks. So I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Now, we'll go down here. We'll look at some of these quotes. Here's what we need to wrestle with as white believers today during each of the defining periods in American history mentioned above, whether the shift was toward racial justice or away from it. The white church, and particularly the white evangelical church, chose the wrong side of the moral battle. Every time Christians of color cried out to us on behalf of the oppressed, we used our theology and biblical knowledge to instead defend our alliance with white supremacy and oppression. Now, is that a true statement? No, it's a false statement. All you have to do is look at history with an honest eye, and you'll see that's a false statement. But it doesn't matter. That's the doctrine, that's the catechism of social justice Christianity, and you had better adhere to it. The same that a Presbyterian would adhere to the Westminster Confession, the same that a Baptist would adhere to the London Baptist Confession of 1689. if you're going to be a social justice Christian, you better adhere to this catechism. It says, and in it says every single time. Well, that's a lie. Look at history. I mean, did the Underground Railroad not exist? As an example. To continue the quote, but in every situation, the white evangelical church got it wrong at the time. That is a lie. That is not true. Okay, so we're going down, but I'm making a point here. But if we can change ourselves, then we can change the church. Yeah, see, this is an infiltration of the church with the cult. And if we can change the church, we can change the nation. The patterns of history seem to suggest we are living during one of those seismic shifts around racial justice right now. Do not chastise POCs or dismiss their message, people of color, because, and this is talking to white people, not to do that, because they express their grief, fear, or anger in ways you deem inappropriate. Understand that historically, we white people have silenced voices of dissent and lament with our cultural idol of niceness. That is stupid. That's utter nonsense. But this is the doctrine, the social justice doctrine, and you had better believe it, or you will be anathema. You will be condemned. Provide space for POCs to well, cuss, or even yell at you. Jesus didn't hold back when he saw hypocrisy and oppression. POC shouldn't have to either. So white Christians are being compared to Pharisees who were hypocrites and were oppressors. There's a direct lineage in their mind. If you think that's ridiculous, then you have to understand this is the catechism of social justice Christianity. Even if it's false, it's still the catechism, and you have to abide by it. You have to believe it. POC shouldn't have to either. Now, going down here, don't get defensive when you're called out for any of the above. When a POC tells you that your words, tone, behavior are racist, oppressive, triggering, you stop. Okay, we're going to see how this is cultic in a moment. Don't try to explain yourself. Don't become passive aggressive or sarcastic. Don't leave in a huff. It may be helpful, however, to inconspicuously step outside, go to the restroom, and take a deep breath. Remain cognizant of the dynamics of white fragility and take note of how it usually shows up in you. All right, so this is manipulation and control. This is adhere to the social justice doctrine or you're anathema. Shut up and let us abuse you. Okay? Well, here are some signs of a cult. There's 14 of them. I'll highlight a few. By the way, all 14 of these, if you want to pause it and read them, apply to the social justice cult that is infiltrating the church right now. Submission. Well, we just saw unquestioned submission in the quotes that we read. You submit, you sit down, you shut up, and you let us cuss and yell and scream at you. That's total submission. Exclusivity. Social justice religious cult is exclusive. Just look at the many quotes that they have, the many doctrines they have. They believe that they are the only true form of Christianity and that no other form of Christianity is the true form. Persecution complex. They have the us versus them mentality. The oppressor and the oppressed. So the white Christians are the oppressors and the people of color Christians are the oppressed. So this is the us versus them and then the persecution complex. So far we've got 3 out of 14. Control. Well, we just saw unquestioned control. We're in control. You sit down, you shut up, and let us yell at you. and you can't say anything about it. That's control. Isolation. Well, there are certain social justice Christians that are beginning to isolate themselves from Christians that are in the mainstream and believe Orthodox historic Christianity, and they are isolating themselves, because they don't feel safe around the other Christians. The whole concept of a safe space and so forth. This is isolation. Love bombing. They do love bomb their own members. Special knowledge. I've seen this coming out of social justice Christians a lot. We have special knowledge on what racism is. You don't. You sit down, shut up, and listen to us, and we will tell you what it is. And so forth. There's other aspects to that they commit, but this one applies. Indoctrination. Well, we just saw indoctrination. Sit down, shut up, and listen to our doctrine. And you do not have a right to have your own mind and have your own thoughts. Shut up, sit down, and we will cuss and yell and scream at you. Salvation, well, many of them claim to believe in the Reformed faith salvation, or even just the evangelical form of salvation, what they believe about salvation. Very little difference between those two, but there is a difference when it comes to election and so forth. But they don't. Their salvation is penance. White Christians, you have to do penance, and you have to pay reparations as a part of your salvation. Groupthink, well, they definitely have the groupthink going on. Cognitive dissonance, they definitely have that going on. Shunning, well, they definitely shun. Gender roles, control of gender roles and definitions. Severe control of gender roles sometimes leads to sexual exploitation. Well, they're doing that in a flip-flop fashion, where they're telling Christians who believe in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, when God said he made them male and female, that those Christians are bad, evil people for believing that. And so they're using gender roles in that way. Appearance standards, often common appearance, well, that one's probably not as prominent, but you can see at least 13 out of 14 are there. Folks, this is a cult. Bring this other one up. This is a cult. Let me show you one more thing as evidence. Oh, that didn't come up. I'm losing the internet. I just lost the internet. I was going to show you the us versus them. Let me see if I can get it to do it one more time. There we go. The chasm between white theology and black liberation. So you see the us versus them, and you see the we're persecuted, the oppressed, and you're the oppressor, and that's two of the cult-like characteristics. This is why I am convinced that this is a cult that is infiltrating the church. So folks, let's be careful, let's be mindful to stay true to the true gospel, to stay true to the true Orthodox historic Christianity, and don't worry about these people trying to shame you, yelling at you, manipulating you, and so forth. Ignore them. Ignore them, because they are not representing true Christianity. Stay true to the scriptures, and we will be able to keep that infiltration out of our churches. Thanks for watching, and remember to check out the Vortex Apologetic podcast on YouTube and on Podbean and iTunes, and I will see you next video.